We're going to begin this evening, opening our special evening, marking the 59th yard site of Rebbetzin Kana, in the place where the Rebbe said the Rebbetzin Kana can always be found. The evening is going to be opened by Rabbi Shloma Majeski, principal of Machal Miyadas, and mentor and listening ear to hundreds and hundreds of women, some of whom are already buddies, and I think maybe even great-grandmothers of Rabbi Shloma Majeski.
I'm not sure how many of you had the opportunity to see this video that's circulating, which I saw Rabbi Hecht is speaking at a rally of children in front of the Rebbe, to the Rebbe, and repeating the Rebbe's words. The Rebbe is listening to everything that he's saying. The Rebbe told him that the Rebbe's presence is here in this building all the time. And how much more so on the night of Vov Tishrei. And even though I'm in and out of this building for many years, Baruch Hashem, after watching that, there's a certain sense of awe that you feel when you walk in tonight that I haven't felt in a very long time. The Rebbe's presence is here. And I'd like to begin by saying that Chav Shvat, Tov Shemem Ches, the year that the Rebbe spoke about Rebbetzin Chaim Mushka, the Rebbe always used the term Machai Yitin Libe, which means it's a pasuk which is referring to how we're supposed to relate to a day and a time passing of someone, that we should take to heart and learn from them and follow their footsteps. Even though we're talking about, this was the Rebbetzin, we're talking about giants, someone who's completely from a different caliber, from a completely different world, but yet there's something that we could learn and apply to ourselves and follow their footsteps on a level that is applicable to ourselves. The same would be with Rebbetzin Chana. We're talking about someone who was a giant in her own right, besides being the Rebbetzin and the mother of Ema Malchus, mother of royalty. And there are so many things that we could learn and apply to ourselves. We know that chinuch, educating children to a woman, the Rebbe explained that this is considered something which is connected to the essence of a woman, to the extent that a woman doesn't have an obligation to educate children. Now, on the surface, it seems strange. Why wouldn't a woman have an obligation, a mitzvah, if what children is so much part of raising children, as part of her life? But the Rebbe explains, on the contrary, because this is something that's part of the essence of a woman, it doesn't even make sense that it should be a commandment. It's just her essence. It's like commanding someone, you should be you. So therefore, the reason why there's no commandment is because chinuch, raising children, is part of a woman's essence. So when we think of what the Rebbetzin accomplished in that area, yes, she raised the Rebbe. And what should we learn from that? That we should also raise children. We should raise a Rebbe. What does that mean? How can we make that comparison? And in general, one could ask, what do you mean the Rebbetzin raised the Rebbe? The Rebbe is who he is because of He has a unique neshama, unique shlichus. This is something which is Hashem's pure plan of Hashem, meant to happen, and it has a connection to the entire creation, entire Jewish people. So why are we attributing this to the Rebbetzin? But there's a precedent to this. One example is the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe's parents, Reb Baruch and Rebbetzin Rivka. When the Alter Rebbe, before the Alter Rebbe was even born, and the Baal Shem Tov learned and heard that she was expecting this child, and he knew that this was going to be this great tzaddik. He already gave her specific instructions, what she has to do, what not to do, and he constantly directed them to raise him in a certain way that he should be able to grow up to be what he's meant to be. And they followed, and they succeeded, and we have the Alter Rebbe. The same we find with the Rebbe. We know the Rebbetzin writes that on the day the Rebbe was born, on the day that he was born, they received 6 telegrams from the Rebbe Rashab. I'm sure it wasn't 6 times Mazel Tov. It was all instructions, directive, what to do, how to do, what not to do. The Rebbe Rashab already saw that this is not an ordinary child, but this is going to be the Rebbe. So how can we possibly even think to accomplish something that's even remotely similar to what the Rebbetzin accomplished, to raise such a child? Perhaps one way of answering that question is, we know that a Rebbe is an neshama klonis, the general neshama. What does that mean? It means that all the Yidden in the generation, even though we're all different, separate entities, different families, but all together we constitute one collective soul. And a Rebbe is the essence of that collective soul. In the language of the Chassidus, the Yechidah. And he includes all the souls in him. Like the example that's brought down, the famous story, Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi was teaching his students, and he saw that they were not as alert and awake as they should be. So he said something to them to sort of wake them up. And he asked them what we would call a riddle, that the women in Egypt gave birth to 6 babies at a time, but one woman gave birth to 600,000 babies. And he asked them if they know the name of the woman, and that surely woke them up, but they didn't know the answer. And he told them it was the mother of Moshe Rabbeinu, because his soul included all the souls of the entire generation, all the 600,000 Yidden, and therefore when he was born, it's as if they were all born at that moment. So the Rebbe is the Yechidah of all the nation, and every individual has that aspect in their neshama. In other words, in our souls as individuals, we have this Yechidah. Yechidah means the essence of the soul. And collectively, the Rebbe is the essence of Klal Yisrael. Very often, we heard from the Rebbe that we want Mashiach to come. Mashiach is the Yechidah of the Jewish nation. One of the things that need to happen for Mashiach to come is that each and every one of us should reveal and bring out that Yechidah that's within ourselves. The Rebbetzin raised the Rebbe, which is the Yechidah of the collective neshama of the Jewish nation. From this we could learn, and this empowers every woman and every person, that we could raise and nurture and develop the Yechidah, which is the spark of Mashiach that's found in each individual child. And what is that practically? The Rebbe explains, Emunah. A child should grow up not just doing what has to be done and not doing what shouldn't be done, but a child should grow up with a pure Emunah, faith in Hashem that transcends logic. That's the Yechidah being nurtured. A child should grow up with a passion and a simcha, a joy, not just observe Torah mitzvahs, but have simcha in Torah mitzvahs. Again, the Rebbe explains that simcha and Mashiach is connected. And simcha, when a child is doing Torah mitzvahs with simcha, the ability to do that, that comes from the mother. And that's again the nurturing of the spark of Mashiach in him. And to be passionate about appreciating the study of Chassidus, which is known as the Yechida in Torah. That's again something that needs to be nurtured. That brings out the Yechida in the child. So basically, it means that what the Rebbetzin did on a global scale, we can all do on a personal level. Nurturing and bringing out that Yechida in the child and in every person, to have a passion for Mashiach, the Amunah in Hashem, the Amunah in Mashiach, and all these things that we mentioned before. In fact, it's interesting that the woman is the one that transmits the Yechida to the child. Whether the child is going to be a Kohen or a Levi or Yisrael, that depends on the father. Whether the child belongs to one tribe or another, that belongs to the father. Whether the child will have that essential identity as a Yid, and that is something which is forever and eternal, and there's nothing in the world that can affect that. That is the Yechida that comes from the mother. She's the one that transmits that, and she's the one that has the ability to nurture it and develop it. And of course, we can all do that. Every person has the Yechida, and every person can follow the same example. Not necessarily women, also men. So, one of the things Rabbi Hecht mentioned today was that Hannah was told by Eli HaKohen, the Kohen Gadol, that he gave her a bracha that all her prayers and all her wishes should be fulfilled. So, being in the presence of Rebbe Tzachana and being in the building of Rebbe Tzachana, I'd like to conclude and wish everybody have a happy and healthy, sweet new year. All the good things that everybody wishes for themselves should be fulfilled. And of course, the ultimate wish is the Gula Mitzvah Shlema, that surely the Rebbe's and bracha and wish we should see it be fulfilled before our eyes of flesh take it.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Majeski. This evening, Rabbi Shea Hecht, whose wise counsel guides so many people, is on the executive committee of NCSJE, son of Rabbi Shea Hecht, who was the Zvulun of the Smoiskin for many decades. I'd like to call upon Rabbi Hecht now, who's going to say a few words.
I have a very difficult task to speak a few words and share and inspire you about the Rebbetzin. Now, I will start off with a sort of disclaimer. Often when my father was on the radio for many years, giving over the words of the Rebbe, etc., when it came to special days like Yud Shvat or Vov Tishrei or other days like that, he said, how am I, a little chassid, I'm using his words, going to really tell you who the Rebbe is, what the Rebbe is, what a Rebbetzin is, who the Rebbetzin was, etc. It is really somewhat foolish to think that we can explain and tell who these people are. Now, of course, there are other speakers here tonight that they themselves are from the Rebbe families, and therefore they are already gifted. They're way ahead of us, light years ahead of us. But for me to give you words of inspiration and tell you something about who the Rebbetzin was, I think would be foolish on my part to think that I can, to use an American expression, to knock the ball out of the park would be somewhat foolish. Plus, in today's world, with computers and technology, we Baruch Hashem, so much has been written, so much has been translated, so much has been out there. It's very, very easy if you know how to use your computer. Not like the old people like myself, but if you know, you can really do the research and really find out. And there's so much Baruch Hashem really written about the Rebbetzin. So what can I share with you this evening that can inspire you on this very special day? Okay, I'll leave you with a question. Thank you very much. I was lucky enough to be brought up in a Lubavitch family. To those who, when you speak to the old timers, some of the other people sitting in this room, they may be able to maybe even have a better glimpse, a little bit older than I, but the Crown Heights was very, very different. Kingston Avenue on Vov Tishrei did not look exactly like that. Not Gombo, not Chocolate, none of these stores and businesses were thriving the way they do today. But let's think for a moment. I am davening Shabbos in shul, and I'm told that the person sitting next to me is the Rebbetzin. I come to a Farbrengen, and I'm told I'm there by the windows, trying to look through, trying to hear what the Rebbe is saying. I'm looking through, and I'm told, be careful, don't push, because the Rebbetzin is here. Now, in other, what we say in the Yiddish word, in other kreisen, in other circles of Hasidic groups, the Rebbetzin takes a very, very active role within the Hasidic movement. Our Rebbetzin Chaim Mushka, for whatever reason it is, some think they do understand, some without things to understand, they think they have to explain even if they don't understand. For whatever reason it is, I surely don't understand. She took no involvement whatsoever, as far as we can see. She was not in the public eye at all, did not take any role whatsoever. But Rebbetzin Hannah, in fact, did. She came to Shul every Shabbos, she came to Farbrengens, she came to the Librarian Parade. In fact, one of the pictures or the movies that were taken, you see her really, if to use a Yiddish expression, kvelling, looking at the Rebbe, and I don't know exactly what part of the parade it was, but she was standing at the side and really enjoying the Rebbe, and many, many comments. In fact, this latest piece that Jem put out, that I'm not going to tell you what it says. If you didn't see it yet, make sure to watch it, where they narrated much of what the Rebbetzin has written in her memoirs or diary, and of the pride that she had standing there and seeing the way Chassidim looked at her Rebbe, listened to her, to the Rebbe, followed the Rebbe, etc. So I think we can take a moment, and by the way, some of the pictures that are out there of the Rebbetzin, in fact, one of those pictures is taken from a Beis Rivka dinner, a fundraiser. My father, of blessed memory, was also involved in Beis Rivka for a while because he worked very close with Rabbi Jacobson, and it was a dinner that the Rebbetzin actually came to. In fact, after my father passed away, there was a man, Irving Schatz, that we honored at a dinner in the 1990s, and he says, I was honored by a dinner 40 years earlier for Beis Rivka, and one of the things that he remembers is meeting the Rebbetzin and having an exchange with the Rebbetzin. But So one of the things went through my mind today is if you would, if I was traveling in the Bible shul and trying to look over to watch it, but at the same time, I know I'm standing right next to the Rebbe's mother. After being asked to speak, I went to the shul that I davened, and a few people that I bumped into, historians in the neighborhood or people who were older than me. I said, tell me, do you remember the Rebbetzin from Kingston Avenue or from 1418 President Street? And what can you tell me? What can you say? Because Rebbetzin Chana was very, very much a member of the community in many, many different ways. And from what I understand is some of these people, again, have given their gem stories and shared their stories. So I'm not going to share their story, but I'm thinking as we, Chassidim of the next generation, if I can now make myself a little bit younger than I am, think about, the Chassidim of the other previous generation, not only do they have a connection with the Rebbe, but also with the Rebbe's mother. In shul tonight, I was talking to somebody. He says, "Go over to Nachum Kaplan, Rabbi Nachum Kaplan." He says, "Talk to him." I said, "Nachum is a cousin, married to Hecht. He's a cousin of mine." I said, "Rabbi Nachum, tell me something. How old were you when in 1965? 1964. How old? Do you remember the Rebbe?" He said, "Well, my family actually goes back into Rebbetzin many, many years. My grandfather had a connection with the Rebbe's father, and my father had a connection with the Rebbe's father. And when we were in Poking, Germany, in the DP camp, we actually had the apartment or the room. Our family was, he said, his parents and himself. He was a little boy. And they were next door to Rebbetzin Chana. He says when we visit Rebbetzin Chana here on President Street, she would ask him, "Do you remember when we were poking together, and your parents dressed you right and put a little hat on your head, and you used to throw the hat off as kids do, and I would chase you and put the hat back onto your head. And you would throw the hat off, and I would chase you and put the hat back on, and it became somewhat of a game." He said, of course, I said he doesn't remember. And then she said something which is very interesting, which I think ties in with something that the Rebbe had said about his mother. And that is, he said, one day visiting the Rebbe in the home on President Street, he says, the reason why he did that is because my husband said, the Yitzhak said, it's very, very important that little boys should go with a head covering, and it affects their Yiras Shamayim. And therefore, so in other words, I didn't do it as because your parents put the hat on and you were taking it off, but I did simply because it was an educational event, an educational intervention on my part to help you and make sure that you're wearing your hat. Which, when he said it to me, one of the things I came across over the last few days was that the Rebbe himself said that much of his education he thanks to his mother, which again would be kind of strange for a Bacha says, I did well in yeshiva because my mother. Most of them would say give credit to the father when it comes to a man or a rabbi's success. But the Rebbe did give much of the thanks and attribute much of the success to his mother. So I thought of juxtapose these two stories of where she saw somebody else's kid and said, "Hey, I'm going to take an intervention," put the hat on his head, and of course was a role model and an educator to her own children. One of the famous stories, and also it went around, the incident went around again this year. I did not see it this year, but I remember from many years ago. my father had somewhat of a unique relationship with the Rebbe, and as he has said, very ultimately in Meskes, he says when he speaks about Rabbi Shea Hecht, Rabbi Shea Hecht used to ask the Rebbe a lot of questions, and he said better to have a foolish question rather than a foolish answer or make a mistake. So when the Rebbe more than once mentioned to my father that his mother is here in this house, so my father decided one day to ask him, okay, Rebbe, where exactly in the house is she? To which the Rebbe said, she's all over the house. She's everywhere in the house. So the girls who dorm here and learn here, and those people who live here or work here, you have a great zchus. If the Rebbe said that, it was after Tavshin Kaf Hey, it was after 1964. So if our spirit was here then, that spirit is here now. You're lucky to have that spirit. That spirit watches over you and watches over us. And let's hope and pray that we will actually have that day when the Rebbe will lead us. His mother will be standing there and like dwelling, smiling and really enjoying and say, that's the Rebbe that I'm so proud of as my son. Just one more thing as I put the mic down. Again, one of the things that came across with where she would stand sometimes on Kingston Avenue and right outside, like Kingston Avenue, outside the shul or on East Parkway, Kingston and thing. Imagine you walk by and you say, saying good Shabbos to the Rebbe's and again, those people that she did know, she did engage in conversation. Actually, that's one more thought came to my mind. The Rebbe said, one of the people I spoke to was Rabbi Zelickson. So Zelickson then said that my father, doctor, first of all, being relatives to the Rebbe, had a relationship with her. And one day, Rebbe Tzachana says to Dr. Zelickson, I told my son that I'm upset that he doesn't get any fresh air. He doesn't go out to get any fresh air. Which he told me yesterday. What do you think? He said, of course I get fresh air. Yesterday was the day before. He was at the oil all day, and he got fresh. So he say that he got fresh air. So she was like laughing about it. That's I know my question. I know who I was talking to. I accepted his answer, but I knew exactly what it was. Let's hope and pray that we are once again reunited. She and until that time, may her zchus be upon all of you to have great success in your learning, in your development, in your growing, and as Bas Chabad, Bas Laurel Chabad, and let's hope and pray that we are very soon able to proclaim that we have Mashiach now.
Thank you for letting me go for it. Please do.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Hecht. Really appreciate it. And now our featured speaker for this evening. This is Esther Sternberg, who is just such a pleasure to listen to all the time, and it's just such a fun. Thank you, Esther.
Good evening, everybody. I hope you can hear me. Girls, tonight is the yard site of Reb Simcha. And very often I get the shudders when I think, imagine how Hashem chose this particular woman to bring our Rebbe into the world. You have to realize there's something very special about her. The Eibusher Hashem chose this woman to be the mother of our Rebbe. And when you think about her greatness, you think about her holiness, you think about who she was, you can't just stand there and say, oh, she was an isolated. She was such a special person. And Rabbi Hecht said something very right. Who are we to judge and to describe? What do we understand? I'm going to go say how great Rabbi Chana is. Who am I to say that? All I want to share with you is personal experiences that I had with her, so I could perhaps cause you to love her more, to know more about her, and cause you to love her more. But before I talk about my personal experiences, I want to just mention something, because our Rebbe would mention this every single time, every year on Vov Tishrei. There was a fundraiser for her yard site. And the Rebbe spoke about his mother's wonderful traits, what she did, and how she went to exile with her husband when he was sent to this godforsaken place in Kazakhstan, where there was no food and there were nothing, there were no stores. And she realized that he has nothing to do, he has no one to speak to. It was a completely barren country. And she realized that he has so much to give because he was this big genius, knew so much Kabbalah, and he's just wasting away. So she wants him to write down his Kabbalistic teachings. But lo and behold, there were no stores in that city. And she couldn't buy a pen or a pencil or a pad of paper because they didn't exist in that city. And she was a very brilliant woman. And guess what? She decided that if she picks berries, she can boil the berries and she's going to get a liquid of a strong color. So it's red berries, it'll be red berries. If it's blueberries, it'll be blue ink. And she made ink. I don't know who gave her that idea, but she made ink out of these different berries so that her husband could write his explanations, his Kabbalistic explanations in Torah. She got a feather from somebody that had chicken. Somebody had a chicken, if you saw it over there. She got a feather so he should write with it. And he wrote it in the margins of the sparring that he had with him. When he came, when he was sent from jail to exile, somehow he got hold of a few svarim. And those svarim, if you know, every sefer has margins. And the margins were empty. And he used those margins to write his Kabbalistic teachings in the margins. Those svarim are here in 770 in the library. And I remember once taking my class to the library, and we saw there was an exhibit of these svarim, and you were able to see that on the top, there was like in red writing, because he had red ink. And then he would continue another time, and the ink he had was maybe blue. So on the same page, you would see different colors, because whatever ink he had. And the Rebbe would always speak about the ink. And I remember thinking to myself, it's so strange. We know about the ink since we're little children. Why is the Rebbe always mentioning the ink? And one year, the Rebbe spoke at the fundraiser, and he said, if you're wondering why I'm mentioning the ink all the time, is because when you talk about a person who passed away, and you want to talk about the greatness that they did in their life, you look for something that they did that affected other people. A lot of people do wonderful things in their life, but did they do anything that affected other people? And the Rebbe said the fact that she made the ink for my father caused that he would be able to write down all these brilliant explanations, the Kabbalistic explanations, and for generations to come, people will be able to continue to learn this because of her. So I just felt I have to mention it because I've always spoken about it. And I keep thinking what we can learn from this, that it was her idea. I'm sure that there was nobody there to give her an idea, or no people around. And nobody could tell her, first of all, that it's so important to have what was in his mind that he should teach us, and that she should come up with this idea of getting ink. I don't know if anybody would have thought of taking berries. She writes in her diary, by the way, there is a wonderful book that came out many years ago called Mother in Israel. I don't know if you have it in the library here. I know it's out of print, but some people have it. You girls should read it because it's so beautiful. She writes a diary about her life. She writes about her time in Russia when life was good, when she was the wife of a very important rabbi. She writes about the time when her husband was arrested and when he went to exile and she followed him, although she did not have to follow him. She could have stayed in Katrin Islam in her house. There was no reason for her to go to exile. She was not exiled, but she wanted to go to help him. So she left her house and went to this terrible place in the city of Chitli in Kazakhstan. By the way, I don't know if you know what Kazakhstan is. There are some Russian girls here, Ukrainian girls, maybe you know. I was there 4 years ago for the 75th yard site of her lady and son. And I remember being shocked. I didn't realize that Kazakhstan is near China. And actually, the people in Kazakhstan are half Chinese. They're basically not Chinese. All the stewards on the plane were Chinese or half Chinese. It's such a faraway place. And that's where he was sent on to, but not to the main city, where there were people and doctors and stores. He was sent to one of these godforsaken cities where there was nothing there. And he would have to wait until the government would give him a slice of bread every day, and maybe one slice of bread, and maybe the next day there was no bread. In her diary, she writes that she was so hungry, and I'm ashamed to write that I'm hungry because it's not nice to say I'm hungry. But all I can think about all day long is that I'm hungry because there's no food. Hannah tried very much to keep her husband's mood up, and that's why she went and decided to collect the berries. She writes in a book that where she collected the berries was in a part of the city, and it was so hot. There was no trees around, there was no shade, and she would bake in the sun as she's pulling out the berries, but she did this diligently so she could make enough to eat for her. Rebbetzin writes how.
Sorry. The air conditioner is.
Rebbetzin writes that at night, if she left the window open to get some air, the mosquitoes would come and bite them to death. If she closed the window, she couldn't breathe. It was just one little small window. It was a very bad climate over there. She suffered so much from the climate. It was so hot during the day and humid, and at night it was chilly, and yet the mosquitoes were biting. And she suffered so much that it was a 5-year sentence. And she just was looking how to help her husband in every which way that his life should be easier. Unfortunately, when he finally was able to move to a bigger city, he already was too sick. The doctors there in the city of Almaty were not able to help him because his sickness had spread. They couldn't help him. They just tried to make his life a little bit better. There were some Hasidim in that city, and she kept asking them, come and learn with my husband and talk to him and keep up his spirits. Until finally, unfortunately, he passed away from his sickness in 1944. Rabbi Simchana had to have people helping her leave Kazakhstan. It's not so easy to leave from Kazakhstan to Europe. And there were people that were doing everything they can to get her out of there. And she ultimately came to France, where there was a sizable Lubavitch community. And she lived with a lot of people that we have now in our community. They remember living with her. There was this one big hotel that was taken over for the refugees that came from Russia. And she lived with these people in this hotel until in 1947, our Rebbe went to France to bring her to America. He went to France and he escorted her here to America. She came in 1947 and they looked for an apartment. It wasn't so easy to find an apartment. Crown Heights, by the way, I don't know if you know this, was once a very affluent community. It was very, very expensive. And a lot of apartments were just taken by very rich people. And at first she rented a room in somebody's house for Mrs. Turner. I remember going to that house on Lincoln Place because my mother, Aleha Shalom, who's such a very wonderful lady, she just loved people. And she thought Rebbe Hannah must be very lonely. There were very few Lubavitch families living in Crown Heights. The people that lived already in America or lived in Brooklyn, they lived in Brownsville, which is a different neighborhood down towards the airport. They couldn't afford to live in Crown Heights. The very few Lubavitchers were here. My mother felt she must be very lonely. So she would go visit on Shabbos afternoon, and I'm her one and only daughter, so she took me along. I had no idea who this lady was, but she was so sweet and so nice to me and so friendly, and she always had certain candies for me. So I went, and it took me a long time to figure out because the Rebbe was not yet Rebbe. When the Rebbe became Rebbe, and I heard she's the mother, I still didn't understand yet at that young age what a Rebbe is. But I got to know her very well, and whenever she would stand outside or she came, as we said, to like a parade or whatever it was, we saw her, she always recognized me and always asked how I'm doing. When I was just 14 years old, I was walking to shul on Rosh Hashanah. By the way, I don't know if you people know this because Rabbi Hecht said she came to shul every Shabbos. I begged to differ with him. We didn't have a lady shul until I was 17. And at that point, Rabbi Simchana didn't come to shul on Shabbos because she was elderly and she wasn't able to. And we didn't have a lady shul. Only on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, they gave us a room that they called the Cheder Sheni, And we couldn't even see the Rebbe. There was a room that didn't have a glass door. There was no glass door to the room that the Rebbe was davening in. So we was just there, but we didn't even see the Rebbe. And but I was going to shul because I have a shul and I knew that Rebbe was there, but I really didn't get to see the Rebbe. And as I'm walking, I meet a lady who says to me, Esther, I usually pick up Rebbe Simchana to take her to shul every Rosh Hashanah at 11 o'clock. I really would like to daven. Now, I should have said, I also want to daven. I'm embarrassed now to tell you that I said, oh, I'll gladly do it. She said, would you do it? I said, oh, I'd gladly do it. I should have said, I also want to daven. But I figured it's such an honor for me. I'm just 14 years old. I should take Rebbe Simchana to shul. Such an honor. So I said, I'll do it. She said she knows you. So when she looks through the peephole in her apartment, she'll open up the door because she knows you. And so it was at 11 o'clock. I knocked on her door. She looked through the peephole. She saw it was me and she opened the door. And she welcomed me. And she said, please sit down in the dining room. And she went to get dressed in her bedroom. When I came into the dining room, I sat there. There was a telegram on the table. I think everybody knows what a telegram is. Yes. And I wasn't peeking, I wasn't stooping, but it was just open in front of me. It was just where she sat me down. And I saw it's a telegram from her son, who unfortunately had passed away in 1952. Yet our Rebbe wanted her to believe that he's still alive because he was afraid that the shock would be too much for her to hear that he passed away so suddenly. So the Rebbe made sure that she gets a telegram every year on Rosh Hashanah saying, Shana Taiva Unesuka, signed by the son who passed away. His name was Yisrael Aryeh Leib, he calls him Label, his wife, and his daughter. And I saw this telegram, and at that point, I had known it's a big secret, but the son is not living. And I was sort of shocked that it says it's from Label, and I was not going to ask how it happened. Later, I found out, Rabbi Rona Vashon told us that the Rebbe asked him to go to a Western Union office, and he should see that they should make up this telegram that says it's coming from Liverpool, England, and as if she should believe it comes from England, and it was signed Label, his wife, and his daughter. The Rebbe made sure before every Yom Tov she got this telegram. When she finally was dressed, she called me into her room that I should help her. I tell the story every year, but there are new girls here. You see the picture? She's wearing this hat. Now, if you take a look, the hat is on a slant. The hat goes on the head on a slant, and it has to be attached to the shakel with a pin, a big, long stick pin. And she said, I cannot put in the pin myself. Could you please put it in for me? And I was so afraid I was going to stick her because how do I know how deep I have to go with the pin? It's after all going through the hat, through a shakel, and I could stick her scalp. And I don't want to hurt her. I said, I'm afraid. She said, don't worry. I said, I don't want to hurt you. She said, you can't hurt me. And I was so petrified that I remembered all the years I would wake up Rosh Hashanah in the morning. The first thing I thought about was Rosh Hashanah. I'm worried about sticking Rebbe with a pin because I took her every year to the last year too. Baruch Hashem, I think I never stuck her, or she just never complained. And once she was dressed, I would walk her very slowly to 770, where then everybody would stand up to escort her in, and everybody just took her with so much love and so much adoration, and I stayed behind. I just did my job. I took her every year since I was 14, and I took her till last year in Tafshin Chav Hey. The first day of Rosh Hashanah, she came to shul and everything was fine. She had no complaints. She didn't say she doesn't feel well. The second day when I came, she didn't even open the door. She said, I'm not feeling well, so I cannot go to shul. I said, for heaven's sake, let me stay with you. I don't want you to be alone. She said she has a companion that she told me the name of the woman that I knew who she was. She's with me, so don't worry. I never believed that at that moment when I said good Yom Tov to her, I'm never going to see her again, because just a few days later is when her neshama left her. But let me tell you about Rabbi Shea Hecht's love for everybody. Rabbi Hecht mentioned, and it was a little bit not clear where she stood. If those of you know where she lived in the building that today belongs to the boys' dormitory, the building that has little beige pebbles on the walls on President and Kingston. Originally, there were 2 apartment houses there. And she lived in the first apartment house on the corner of Kingston, and on the first floor on the right-hand side. I knew the apartment so well that I can tell it to you in my sleep. And during the day, though, on the day that it was not raining or snowing, she liked to stand outside on Kingston with a body leaning against the wall of the building. I don't know why nobody brought her chair. I keep thinking, why didn't anyone think of bringing her chair? She would stand on her feet, leaning against the building, because she wanted to get fresh air. And the sun was always shining on that side of the street. So she always stood there to get the sun, to get the air. And whoever passed by, most people, as I said, were not Lubavitcher people lived in Crown Heights. There were some people of Hasidic background, some people that were modern Orthodox, some people that were young Israel ladies, some people that were from Jewish Center ladies. But the Rebbe was so friendly to everybody that she would nod hello. And if somebody came over to talk to her, she was everybody's grandmother. She was so friendly to everybody. And people would ask her advice and people would ask her, and she was so willing to speak to them and so giving. And all over the United States, you can find people that will say, oh, my grandmother lived in Crown Heights in the Lubavitcher Rebbe's mother's building. And we remember her so well. She was like a grandmother to me. And you have so many people that say this because she was so wonderful to everybody, even though she didn't know who these people are. I'm going to go back to the story, the personal story, but I want to just tell you some more about our Rebbe's relationship with his mother and what we can learn from that. Our Rebbe personified Kibbud Ein. What he did for his mother when he was so busy taking care of the whole world, yet for his mother, there was no such a thing that he didn't have time for certain things that had to be done. The Rebbe would visit his mother every single day, if it was raining, if it was snowing, whatever. And a lot of people didn't know that he visits her at this time. And some women used to come and visit her just to have a chat. And I was told this many times that when the Rebbe came in, he had his own keys. And he would come in, go straight to the apartment. As soon as you walked in, you opened the door, on the right side was the kitchen. And then there was a hallway, to the left was the dining room, and to the right was her bedroom. And the Rebbe would stand in the kitchen and he would listen. Is his mother talking with anybody? Is she having a visitor? And he didn't want to disturb. And very often there was somebody there. So the Rebbe sat in the kitchen, did not want to bother his mother because she's having a guest. And he waited. Our Rebbe sat and waited when these two ladies were talking about maybe a recipe for chocolate cake. I don't know. But the Rebbe waited because his mother had company. And some of these women, as they walked out, they were leaving, they saw the Rebbe's in the kitchen. They were so embarrassed. They realized that they held the Rebbe back from visiting his mother. So the word spread around, never visit after 7 p.m. in the evening till 8, because the Rebbe might be there just then and you cannot go. But the Rebbe would never tell people, don't come, because my son is coming, because she just loved everybody. And if they wanted to come, she was just welcoming them if they didn't ask her when it's the right time. In 1952, when her son passed away so tragically, the Rebbe was very, very, very adamant that his mother should not find out, because she had suffered so much in Kazakhstan. She had 5 years of starving, of terrible condition. She had so much heartache from what she went through with her husband dying early and all that he felt that if she finds out that her son passed away, it would be terribly devastating to her health. So the Rebbe decided that his mother does not have to know. And those of you that have a question, but doesn't she have to sit Shiva? The halacha is that if she would hear that he passed away, she has to sit Shiva. But it's not a mitzvah to sit Shiva to tell her you have to sit Shiva. That doesn't happen. And the Rebbe consulted with a Rav of what to do. And he made up that she's not going to know. And the Rebbe made a special minyan in his Yechinas room. And he called in, besides Rabbi Chodek, the secretary, 8 more people that were, I don't like to say the word sworn to secrecy, because we don't swear, but they were told, you are not allowed to tell your wife, you're not allowed to tell your children that this minyan is taking place. Because the Rebbe wanted to say Kaddish and did not want his mother to find out. And if somebody tells their wife, the wife could tell her friend, and the friend could see Rebbe in the street and say, oh, I'm so sorry you lost your son. Then she would find out. So these 10, I know my father was one of the people we never knew about it until so many years later. And he said he wasn't allowed to tell my mother, he wasn't allowed to tell any of us. My brother was older than me, and he couldn't tell because Rebbe said no one should know. And that's where the Rebbe davened. I don't know if it was just Shiva or Shleishim. I know that he davened when he said Kaddish over there secretly that nobody else should know. The Rebbe had a dilemma though. He used to visit her every day, and during Shiva, you're not allowed to go for a walk. But he knew that if he doesn't come to visit her, she's going to be worried, she'll know something's wrong. And the Rav told him, you may go for a walk because you're protecting your mother's health, but you can't sit down, of course. So just make yourself busy looking in the bookshelf and say that you're busy and you're going to be a short visit. There was another problem though. In those days, anybody here my age, you will know that those days, the only sneakers we were able to find were white canvas sneakers. Men wore white, children wore white, ladies, men, women, everybody white. And if the Rebbe would walk in white sneakers, of course you would see the sneakers because it's so outstanding. So the sneakers were polished over and over and over with black shoe polish that nobody should notice it's white, and that he should be able to go visit his mother. She should not see that it's sneaker. And so he went every day to visit her, and he made excuses why he has to leave, but he kept it so that she should not see any change in anything that he was doing. The Rebbe did something else very interestingly. The Rebbe wanted her to feel that the brother's alive. So he made up with his sister-in-law that she should write letters to the Rebbe about what's going on in the family. Then the Rebbe will write a letter to his mother. He had very similar handwriting to his brother. So he was going to write in his brother's name, send the letter back to the sister-in-law in England, that she should send the letter with a postmark from England to Rebbe Tzachana. And this is what the Rebbe did for 12 years. She was getting letters, supposedly signed label, although he wasn't living, and it was all the information of what's happening supposedly in the house, just that she should feel that she's getting news about them. Those days they didn't have phones for everybody, so she didn't expect to get a phone call. We don't know for sure if she ever guessed, but she never spoke to anybody about it. Maybe she did guess at some point, but she knew that the Rebbe didn't want her to know because she saw what the Rebbe was doing, so she never spoke about it. I didn't hear from anybody that she said to them, I'm afraid he passed away. She never said that. But the Rebbe made sure that everything is taken care of. My husband tells me something that I'm sorry I couldn't see it, but I wasn't there. I don't know if you know this. After the Frierdiker Rebbe passed away, Rebbe Tzemach his wife, had meals for the Rebbe all the days of every Yom Tov. On Rosh Hashanah, Erev Yom Kippur, Matzah Yom Kippur, Sukkot was in the Sukkah, but all the other Yom Tovim upstairs on the second floor of the Frierdiker Rebbe's apartment. There was a men's dining room and a woman's dining room. Rebbe Tzemach would also come to the meals. How did Rebbe Tzemach go home Rosh Hashanah at night? Now, the reason I'm asking this question is because we all know that Rosh Hashanah is a very serious time, especially by the Rebbe. A second doesn't go by without the Rebbe davening and saying Tehillim and doing all these miraculous things for the world. And yet, when his mother had to go home, the Rebbe took her, put his arm under hers, and he walked her down the steps, and he walked her down Kingston Avenue to her house to make sure that she's going home safely. My husband was a bacher, and he said to see that is to see the greatest, he couldn't even describe it, that the Rebbe on Rosh Hashanah is walking his mother slowly, doing kibbud aim, making sure that she'll be safe when she goes home. I'm just mentioning this because I think we all can learn a tremendous amount of doing kibbud ava'im. Each and every one of us can know how we can improve on that and what we can do to honor our parents the right way. I don't know how much time I have, so I'm going to go now to the personal stories just for you to get a feeling of this great woman and to get to love her. I'll tell you a story that happened one year when I was about 14 years old, or 15 maybe, not more than 15. I was walking to shul on a Shabbos before we had a shul. So I'm telling you I was walking to shul, but there was no shul. Well, where was I going? We had never had a chance to see the Rebbe's holy face because there was no shul. So we would go to 770 and wait for the Rebbe to finish davening, and we would stand outside, and when the Rebbe was walking home to his home, we would see his holy face. So I'm walking to 770 to see the Rebbe's face. And as I come towards President, I see Rebbe Tzemach standing in front of her house, not a usual place on Kingston Avenue, but right in front of the house of President. And I thought it was very unusual, so I run over to ask her if she needs anything. I said, Rebbe, do you need something? Shabbos, do you need anything? And she tells me the following, that today, this Shabbos, is the uproof. Girls, if you don't know, uproof is the Shabbos before a boy gets married. he gets an aliyah to the Torah, and there's a big kiddush for him. Because it's very special that this gives him kind for his future. And there's usually a very big kiddush. Men come to the kiddush and women come to the kiddush, except in 770, there was no place for women. So Rebbe Sakana said, this Shabbos is the uproot of the people that own the fruit and vegetable store, Raskin's Fruit, that's across the street from our house. I so want to wish my mazel tov to the parents, but I can't go to shul because there's no place. So please walk me to the store, and I'm going to give over my wishes. And I'm going to give over my wishes to the store. Now, I didn't understand how you give over the wishes to a store that's going to shops, but I'm a little girl. What do I know? I took her, and I'm standing there, and she stands in front of the store. She closed her eyes so strongly, and she was dominated with, so you felt her whole body like so emotional. And her eyes were closed for maybe 5 whole minutes in front of a closed store. Anyway, I don't know what's going on, but I'm too young to do anything. And then she says, but yes, now, please take me down the block, because there was a grocery store that belonged to the Collins family. The Collins family was Lipsker. They owned the grocery store. So she wants to wish the mazel tov also. So she said, take me to that store. So we stand in front of the grocery, and again, she closes her eyes, and she's so serious, and I'm not understanding this. And then when she finished, she says, now, please take me home. I took her home. I made sure she's safe at home. And I ran home. I didn't go to 770. I ran home to ask my mother, explain what happened here. This is something so strange to me. Please explain what I just witnessed. And my mother said to me, don't you realize she's such a big tzaddikus? And through her ruchniistic wishes, she's reaching the owners of the store. In a ruchniistic way, she's giving over her bracha to the parents of the store, by the fruit store and by the grocery store. I remember I never told the story to anybody because I think people are not going to believe me. How do you believe such a story? But one year I was teaching in Beis Rivka many years later, and I told the story by accident. And after I told the story, a whole bunch of grandchildren, the Roskin family, came running to me to say, how come we never heard the story? And I said, I really didn't know if anybody would complete the story. Just to show you how much she cared for the people that she bought fruits and vegetables that she bought the grocery from. There's another story that I witnessed in a very funny way. My grandfather was a Rebbe from the Polish Rebbe's, and he had a shul in the east side of Manhattan. And there was a family there that I knew very well because I went very often to his shul. And the girl was getting married, and she took an apartment in Crown Heights because she liked the neighborhood. And she took it in the same building the Rebbe's kind of lived. And she would go every day to put things in the apartment. And one day she hands Rebbe Sakana an invitation to her wedding. And she said, will you come to my wedding? And the Rebbe said, oh, I would love to come to your wedding. And she said, oh, I would be so happy. And this girl was so excited. She goes, tells everybody, well, Babich Rebbe's mother is coming to my wedding. Now, the Rebbe didn't know her. She had no connection to her. But she felt if somebody's asking her to come, it's a mitzvah to be B'Sameach HaKala, she's going to go. Now, when this girl was bragging, my mother somehow heard about it, and my mother was hysterical because Rebbe Sakana didn't have anyone to drive her. The wedding was going to be in Manhattan. Rebbe was over 80 years old. It's going to be in the winter. How is she going to get to this wedding? They didn't think that she doesn't have grandchildren to drive her. She doesn't have a private chauffeur. So my mother felt she has to speak to the mother of the bride and tell her, you made a mistake by inviting the Rebbe because she had no way to come. You have to rescind the invitation and say instead you want the children to come to get a blessing in the house. So my mother called up to the mother of the bride, and they said, oh, she's in President Street in the daughter's apartment. She has her own number ready. So my mother calls her at that number, and she tells her the whole thing, and she tells her that you have to really rescind the invitation because Rebbe has no way to get there. And she said, thank you so much. I don't know what my daughter did. My daughter just invited her, but I realize it's too hard. I'm going to call her in the morning, and I'm going to tell her that I really think she should not come, and the children will come to her for a blessing. A minute after my mother hung up with the mother of the bride, Rebbe Khan is on the phone with my mother. And she said, why do you care if I want to go to this Debitzer girl's wedding? Now, my mother had no clue how she knows a minute after she spoke to the mother. So she says, who said I care? Listen right here, my mother, I remember this so clearly. Who said that I care? So the Rebbe says, don't tell me you don't care, because I picked up the phone to make a phone call, and we had a cross wire. Years ago, the wires got crossed at the same building. And she heard my mother's whole conversation, recognized my mother's voice, and she was angry at my mother that my mother is disturbing her from going to be the Sameach HaKanah. So she called my mother, and she says, I want to go, because the mission to be the Sameach HaKanah. And my mother said, I have nothing against it. She started to stammer, she didn't know what to say. And the Rebbe says, please let me go, because it's a mission to be with Sameach HaKanah. So my mother called the mother the next day in her house in Manhattan, and she said, listen, Rebbeson wants to come. You have to hire a car or hire somebody to pick her up and take her back, because she wants to come, and there's no way she can come on her own. Just to show you how Rebbeson cared. And she had no connection to this girl, just a lovely young girl that's getting married, and Rebbeson kind of wants to be the Sameach HaKanah. The third story is more personal, but just another show to show you how she cared about people that were young. I didn't say unimportant people, but they weren't majorly so important. When we got engaged, my husband, according to the Rebbe's instructions, was not in New York. The Rebbe didn't like that a chassan and kallah should be in the same city. They shouldn't see each other so much. So he was in Canada, but he came for Purim to be at the Rebbe's Fabrengen. And my father said, why don't you take it to Rebbe's Chana? She should get to meet your husband. You should do me so well. So I said, okay, we made an appointment. And my husband was very shy, and I was very bold because I knew her so well. Well, I talked about. So I said to Rebbetzin, this is my husband. What's his name? I said, Rebbetzin, you're not going to know who he is. He doesn't come from a Lubavitcher family. He comes from a very Hasidic family, but they're not Lubavitch. He became Lubavitch at about 10 years old, but you're not going to know his family. She says, where does he come from? So he said, he comes from, I said in Russia, because Russia and Ukraine were the same. Today we know it's different. But so she said, where? So I said, well, his father's side comes from Kiev, and his mother's side comes from Odessa. She says, Odessa? Odessa? I come from Odessa. Who is the family in Odessa? So I say the name Friedman, and she gets red in the face because she was very, very close with my husband's grandmother called Rachel Razel Friedman. So she said, Rachel Razel is a grandmother? And I said, yes. And I think she's getting so red. She said she's alive. She lived through the war. I thought that she perished. I didn't hear anything from her all these years. She's alive. Oh, she's such a close friend of mine. And I thought, I don't know what I did the wrong thing, because who knows if she'll calm down. She finally calmed down. Because of this, she worried about my husband, thinking he comes from Israel. Maybe he doesn't have any friends. Maybe he's lonely. So whenever he would walk home from the Kailo at 2:15, they used to leave the Kailo, walk down Kingston Avenue to go home. And the Rebbe was standing in the street. She looked at him and she watched the scene, and she always loved talking with friends. He always had friends and he's always smiling. So she called on my mother. She said, I want you to know I'm watching your son-in-law. And I'm so happy to hear that he has so many friends. I see him always talking and so joyful. And I never saw him sad or walking alone. I'm so happy that he acclimated in America. That's how she cared about a young man. We were just married the first year. He was very young when we got married. I think everybody here knows that the name Hannah is actually an acronym for the 3 mitzvahs that the women are given. We are honored to do those 3 mitzvahs, the very special mitzvahs. The Het stands for challah, that we have to separate the challah, but it also stands for everything to do with the food and drink, and it has to do with kashrus of everything in our home. The Nun stands for Nida, which are the laws of family purity and the laws of tznius. And the Hey stands for Havlakas Haner, lighting Shabbos candles. After Rebbe Zachariah passed away, the Rebbe asked us very fervently that we should strengthen our observance of these 3 mitzvahs in honor of his mother. Before the mitzvah started, there was no mitzvah neshek yet, there weren't the other mitzvah, but he told us that we should strengthen our observance, and we should try to inflict it on other people, teach other people how to keep these mitzvahs. And of course, later on, when the mitzvah started, we were doing that. We were very busy doing that. Leilu Nishmas, his mother. This year, we entered our 50th year of Mitzvah Neshek. Mitzvah Neshek started in 1974, and we're in our 50th year. So I want to just tell you 1 or 2 stories to give you a very strong push for you to want to do Mitzvah Neshek, because the Rebbe asked us to do this, and the Rebbe wanted us to do this, not only for the sake of the other person that we're going to influence, but for our sake. And I will soon tell you what the Rebbe said about doing Mitzvah Neshek. But let me tell you a story, because I don't know how many of you feel comfortable going on Mitzvah, but I want to tell you the power of one. The power of one. So I want to tell you a story that happened many, many years ago. There was this woman standing or sitting at the airport with her niece, a little girl of 6 years old. And she saw a Lubavitcher man putting on tefillin with people that are about to leave on the plane. And she realized he's Lubavitcher. So she tells her niece, go over to him and tell him that you light your Shabbos candle because the Lubavitcher Rebbe wants you to. So the little girl goes over to this man and she says, I light Shabbos candle because the Lubavitcher Rebbe said so. This bacher, I found out later who he was very excited that this little girl's coming over to him because the Lubavitcher Rebbe said it was just at the beginning of Mitzvah Neshek. So he gave her a present, a candle holder. Now, this is completely hashgacha pratis because why did he give her a present if she's already lighting? She has a candlestick, but he just felt he has to give her a gift because she's so cool. When this lady saw the candlestick, she goes over to this bacher and she says, I want you to know that I am an assistant principal in a school called Bialki. It's not very religious school, it's a Jewish school, we have a lot of students, and the principal doesn't let anything too religious. But this week, this man is on vacation in Israel, so I'm in charge. If you will send somebody down to this school and talk to the children and give them these candlesticks, they could all start to light candles. So she gave this bacher her phone number, and I contacted her, and she told me that there are 500 children to school, half are girls, half are boys. I sent 2 girls down, and they made a very beautiful presentation, and they told the children that you have to light at a certain time, that you don't light later. And the children took it very seriously, and it seems when they came home, they were telling their mother, Mommy, candle lighting is in 40 minutes. Candle lighting is in 30 minutes. Mommy, be careful. Mommy. And she got phone calls on Sunday from so many mothers saying, we never saw children so involved in something, but they were sitting by the clock. They didn't want us to light later than the time. And one after the other, she said, I had to leave my apartment because the phone doesn't stop ringing. And I had to go to another apartment to call you to tell you this. Because of that, this woman, her name was Miriam, she went on the mic, the PA system every Friday, and she announced her children, I want you to know the candle lighting today is so-and-so. Remember to remind your mothers to light on time and not to light later. And she did this every year for years and years. She later told me, and I became very good friends because she told me that she has students that were already in college. And because of their schedule, they called her, what can I do? I can't light candles because I'm in class. And she went and spoke to people at the college that they should change the classes. The girls should have the ability to light the Shabbos candle and not have class just at that time. For years and years, she was doing that. And just last week, I met somebody, 2 weeks ago, I met somebody who told me that because of Miriam Vatkin, this lady that all these years ago, she is completely religious today because she changed the schedule for her grandmother to light Shabbos candles, and her grandmother made sure that her daughter lit, and I started lighting, and now I'm completely Shabbos. One candlestick that wasn't even important to give to the girl because she was already lighting. I'll tell you another story. Not that I want to brag about it, but it happened with me, and it just happened. I was put into the hospital with a problem with my back, and that hospital had only 2 bedrooms. And there was another lady in the room, quite older than me, and unfortunately she had lymphoma. And I found out that it's a very scary disease, and I was very worried about her, but she was quite cheerful, and she became very good friends, and I had a lot of visitors, and my children, and my parents, and she was very friendly with everybody. She was a very lovely woman. And before she left a little before me, I begged her that she should light Shabbos candles. And she said she's going to try. She didn't do it ever. She's going to try. I told her, I spoke about it every day in the hospital. All I talked about lighting Shabbos candles. Anyway, she went home, and I called her the first Friday, and she said she was going to do it. Then I called her every Friday to make sure she remembers to light Shabbos candles. And after a while, maybe 5-6 months, she told me, you don't have to call me anymore. I'm doing it. I love it. Don't call. Okay. Good luck to you. Anyway, years later, I happened to go to speak about Rabbi Shea Hecht's yard site in Coral Springs. And the lady that called me out at after I spoke, she said, I wonder if I could get candle holders to give to the girls at the bat mitzvah of my daughter that's going to be in 4 weeks. I said, no problem. I'll take your address and I'll send it. She called me on the phone. Okay. And I told her I'm going to send it to her. I didn't send it right away because I knew this time 4 more weeks. I was going to send it next week. One day I get a phone call. This lady is on the phone and she said, Mrs. Sternberg, I'm really calling you to find out when I'm going to get the candle holders, but I have to tell you something unbelievable. I have an aunt that lives in Manhattan. She's a pretty old lady, but she came for my daughter's bar mitzvah. And I said out loud, it's just to nobody, oh, I have to call Mrs. Sternberg to ask when I'm getting the candle holders. And her aunt says, oh, you want her number? I have a number in my traveling phone book. So she says, how do you know Mrs. Sternberg? She says, well, I was in the hospital with her. I became very good friends with her. And I carry a phone number in my traveling phone book. Wait, I'm going to bring it. I'll give you the number. And then as she called me, she says, I want to give you a phone number. Somebody wants to talk to you. And it was this lady. This must have been 5 or 6 years later. I really didn't know she was alive because she really had a sickness that she could have not been alive. I said, oh, I'm so happy to talk to you. How are you feeling? She said, Esther, you made me light candles, and I pray to God every Friday. Keep me alive. Bring me, so I should get well. I know it's very hard. Most people don't get out of this, but help me. And I got completely well. I'm completely free of my disease. It's all thanks to me lighting the Shabbos candles that you inspired me to do. One lady has such a strong feeling that Hashem listened to her when she bench lift. Tell you one more story that just very quickly. One day I get a phone call from a girl speaking Hebrew. And luckily I answered the phone, not anybody else, because I speak Hebrew and this lady couldn't speak English yet or too well. And she said, "Midavrim kan ivrit?" So I answered, okay, and I spoke to her in Hebrew. And she said she's actually taking care of a woman that's paralyzed, and the woman can't get out of bed. And the woman cannot light Shabbos candles. She's afraid of fire and she won't be able to save herself. So is there anything you could do? I saw a sign that you help people to light Shabbos candles. I said, I'm going to ask a rabbi because there are electric candle holders that people could use in an emergency, like in a hospital we can't light with a fire. And I'll find out if she can get that exemption. And then she said, give me the address. And I said, you're from Israel. What are you doing here? And we start a conversation. And she tells me she came to teach and work out the children are too rowdy for her. So she's a dental assistant. Okay. What else do you do? She tells me she goes to classes at night. What classes? She's going to the Jewish Theological Seminary. Now that is a conservative place where people learn to be a rabbi or people learn about Yiddishkeit, but in a conservative slap. I said, the Ma'at Lamed, what are you learning there? She said, I'm learning about the Maggid of this rich. I always choked. What is she going to hear about the Maggid of this rich from conservative people? I said, why don't you come to us? He was like a grandfather. I don't know how to say it ever. I said, he was like our grandfather. Why don't you come? We have school for people like you. Why don't you come here and you'll learn about our heritage as our family? And she came the next Sunday to the Chochana. This is 40-something years ago, and she came only on Sunday. She was working in Manhattan and she couldn't stop. Later, we got her an apartment here. She lived with somebody, and she had her first Seder in her life at the Chochana, because the Choliyat, well, then the Chochana. Why did she have her first Seder? Because her mother was angry about the Holocaust and didn't let anything religious happen in the house. So she lived in Israel and never had a Seder. But because I invited her to me, and I heard that Rebbe was coming here, she came here, had her first Seder in her life. She was about 36 or 37 years old, the first Seder she had here. After that, she was completely blown away. She looked at the Rebbe, she didn't say a word because the Rebbe spoke Yiddish and she didn't know any Yiddish. But just looking at the Rebbe's face, she was completely, she didn't know what to believe. She doesn't want to move away from here. And she ended up living with an older woman who needed a companion. And she lived here until she went back to Eretz Yisrael to get married a few years later. And she is this wonderful, wonderful woman, has a wonderful daughter. And she once told me that, Esther, if not for that phone call about helping somebody to light candles, where would I be? All my friends, they're not religious. Their children, they're so worried their children are going backpacking to India and to Taiwan and to all these places, and they worry that their children are on drugs. You know what my biggest problem is? That my daughter is not allowed to go shopping in the mall because the school she goes to, Beis Yaakov School in Yerushalayim, they don't let her shop in the mall because things are not tzniusik. She can only buy clothing in Nea Sha'ar, the very religious name of Yerushalayim. So that's my biggest problem. Can you imagine the difference between me and my friend? It's all because of that phone call to help somebody else light Shabbos candles. I want to tell you that when the Rebbe got up from Shiva after Rebbe Simchai Moshka, we had a fundraiser just in those days of the Shiva. We had it months before, and everybody said we should not cancel it. We should do it and do something in her memory. So we made a special fund for more advertising in her memory. And I never wrote to the Rebbe because I didn't think it was right for me to tell the Rebbe to write him a letter while he's sitting Shiva. But somebody told the Rebbe we made this fund. Now, my father was my main fundraiser, and on Rosh Chodesh Adar, which was 2 days after the Rebbe got up from Shiva, we got a call that we should come to the Rebbe's house, to the second floor, where there's a very beautiful library, a big study that the Rebbe has, and the Rebbe wants to see us for Yechidus after davening. Now, it happens to be that my father and I were in the hospital. Rebbe Shea Hecht passed away, which has nothing to do with what I'm talking about today. And we thought maybe that's what the Rebbe is going to talk about. Maybe he's going to ask us what happened at the end. And we were so nervous. I remember my father was shaking and I didn't know how to calm him down. I walk into the Rebbe's room with my father, and the Rebbe holds out an envelope, a white envelope, and he tells me to come take it. And it was the invitation to the fundraiser that I had sent the Rebbe months ago, or weeks ago, and the Rebbe said it was not the right time for me to give you my blessings, and I want to give you I heard that you made a fund on the name of the Nifteris. The Nifteris is the woman who passed away, and because the gematria, the numerical equivalent of her name is the numerical equivalent is 470. I want to give you $470 plus an extra dollar for extra success. And the Rebbe started giving us brachas. Ya'ir mazolam. Their mazel should be brightened of all those that help you in your project of this campaign, meaning all those that help us financially. Ya'ir mazolam. Their mazel should be brightened of all those that go out to try to get other people to bench lift. Their mazel will be brightened if you go out and try to influence somebody. And Ya'ir Mazalah, the mazel will be brightened of all those that start to light Shabbos candles as a result of this activity that we do. Girls, I want to tell you, we all look for a schus. We want more than one schus. The Rebbe said, Ya'ir Mazalah, your mazel will be brightened. And I have to tell you that some of you know that I used to stand by the Rebbe by dollars, and I very often heard the Rebbe when he spoke out loud. He spoke privately, I never listened, but he spoke out loud. And very often, somebody came with a child and wanted a bracha. The child should be well, the child should do better in school. And they would say, does she light Shabbos candles? And they would never miss an opportunity to make sure that every girl that passes by, that she lights Shabbos candle. That's how important the Rebbe felt it was, that we bring light into this world, spiritual light, and that we bring the neshamas of all these women who want to light, who perhaps don't know about it. They are like a teenage shidduch, they were never told about it. We have to see that they light Shabbos candle. That will be a schus for us. That will be a schus for Rebbe Hana. It will be a schus for Rebbe Simchai Moshka. It will be a schus for Klal Yisrael if we do that. I want to wish you all Gemar Chasima Tova, a good Gebench year.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Sternberg. I think everybody in this room understands why Mrs. Sternberg is one of the most beloved teachers in Beit High School, a highlight of many of the students there at their class. Before we close this evening, of course, we want to thank people who were very involved in organizing and setting up for the program. All of the students who live here in the dorm, headed by our three very capable madrichos, Yael, Mushki, and Miriam, who are introduction of our own mother, Mrs. Sternberg. And of course, thank you, Bob, for always being there for us as well. And Mr. Lucas. Thank you all very, very much. And you're all welcome to have really questions. Martha Fimateva.